Hello everybody and welcome to the dental anatomy series. Well, in this series I'll be talking about the morphology of each tooth. But before that I need to talk about the anatomical landmarks of each teeth so you can understand what I'm saying when we come to the morphology part. So, for the anatomical landmarks of teeth, we'll be splitting up to the crown and the tooth. The landmarks in the crown, the landmarks in the root. For the landmarks in the crown are split into the elevations, depressions, and other. I decided to add it in other. So for elevations, we've got 4: cusps, tubercle, cingulum, ridge. For the depressions, we've got fossa, sulcus, supplemental grooves, and pits. For the other, we've got lobes and mamelons. I'll be going in detail on for each and every single one of them after. So for the elevations, we've got cusps. A cusp is, by definition, something that is called a pyramidal elevation. So it's just an elevation that looks like a pyramid, you know, a little pyramid. So this is a cusp, this is a cusp, that's 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 a cusp. So it's just a pyramidal elevation that makes up a divisional part of the occlusal surface. And these cusps are called according to its location. So this one's called the buccal cusp. This one's called the lingual cusp. So it's just a pyramidal elevation. You can think of cusps as a mountain. So this is a mountain. This is it looks like a cusp. Well, you think of it as a mountain or a pyramid. So second thing, we got a tubercle. The tubercle is a smaller elevation, unlike the cusps, which is a large elevation. This one's a smaller elevation. This smaller elevation is produced by extra formation of enamel. So if we look at this picture right over there, you can see here it's like some sort of a tubercle over there. That's what we call a tubercle. This is called a tubercle or cusp of Carabelli. It's called the cusp of Carabelli, but by definition, it's just a tubercle. Most sources refer to this as a tubercle. It can be found on maxillary first molar. You may be able to feel it with your tongue right now if you just go with it through your tongue with it on the lingual surface. This right over there is tubercle as well. So it's just produced by extra formation of enamel. You'll not even be able to see on every single tooth. It's not like a general landmark. All right, the third thing is a cingulum. A cingulum is just a rounded elevation that can be found on the cervical third. So now this is cervical third on the lingual surface of the interior teeth. So you can see this bulge right over there. That bulge is called the cingulum. That's in a side proximal view. This is in a lingual view. You can see it's like a little bulge. This bulge over there is called your cingulum. So it's just a rounded elevation, can be found on cervical third on the lingual surface of all interior teeth. So it can be found on incisors and canines, upper and lower. Right over there as well. That's an incisor on the lingual surface. You can see this bulge over there. That's called a cingulum. A ridge. A ridge is any linear elevation. Right over there, it's just a linear elevation. There's types of ridges. We'll be going over them in a moment. But in general, we'll just talk about the ridge in general. So a ridge is just a linear elevation, and it's named according to the location of its tooth on the tooth surface. Well, yeah, according to its location. So talked about cusp before. It's like a pyramidal elevation. That's like represents like this. If you kind of wanted to draw it or something. Now a pyramid has to have some sort of a linear elevation. This. It's like a line over there, this line, this line. These all make up a cusp. So that's a ridge, 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 that's a ridge. Think of this as a ridge, and this whole thing is a cusp. This letter X is the cusp tip. Okay, so this letter X is the cusp tip. This is your mesial ridge. This is your distal ridge. It's named according to its location. That's the buccal cusp, that's the lingual cusp. So it would be the buccal cusp, the mesial ridge of the buccal cusp, sorry, and this would be the distal ridge of the buccal cusp. This over there is the buccal ridge. It's called labial on the canines, so it's called the labial ridge on canines, but this is a premolar, so it would be called a buccal ridge, sorry. It would be called a buccal ridge. And this right there, on posterior teeth, since this is a posterior teeth, this is called a triangular ridge. We'll be talking about a triangular ridge in a moment. So on posterior teeth, it's called a triangular ridge. So it's just a cusp tip that so it's just the ridge that goes from the cusp tip all the way to the central part of the tooth. It's called the lingual ridge on canines, sorry. But on posterior teeth, it's called a triangular ridge. We'll be talking about in a moment. So the main types of ridges, there's several types of ridges, but the main ones the main ones that you kind of need to know is the first you got the marginal ridge. If we come and try to figure out what actually means, marginal means it's found in the margin of the tooth. The occlusal surface. Ridge is just a linear elevation, so it's a linear elevation that can be found marginally. So this right over there, that's a linear elevation. That's a linear elevation. It can be found on the side of the occlusal surface. That's a marginal ridge. That's a marginal ridge. And it's named according to its where it's located on surface. So in that sense, that's the mesial side and that's the distal side. So this will be called the mesial marginal ridge. And this one over there would be called the distal marginal ridge. And okay, this is again an incise on a lingual surface. So yeah, that's the marginal ridge over there. That's a marginal ridge. There's always two marginal ridges on each tooth surface. Okay, so triangular ridge, I just talked about it before, but I'm going deeper detail right now. So this is a cusp tip. So it's just a linear elevation that goes from the cusp tip all the way to the central part of the tooth. So it's called a triangular ridge because the slopes represent some sort of a triangle. Okay, so this represents some sort of a triangle. This represents a triangle. This looks like a triangle. This looks like a triangle. So that's the main reason why it's called a triangular ridge. All right, you got a transverse ridge. So a transverse ridge is just a union of two triangular ridges. So it's just a union of two triangular ridges. So this over there is called a triangular ridge. That's a triangular ridge. But both of them, they're referred as a transverse ridge. Again, same thing here. That's a triangular ridge. That's a triangular ridge. Both of them are referred as a transverse ridge together. That's a molar. Okay, so if we look at it here, it's a premolar. That's a triangular ridge. That's a triangular ridge. Both of them together are referred as a transverse ridge. All right, so you got an oblique ridge. Okay, so if we just come and try to find out what it means by the name, oblique means diagonal. Ridge, it just refers as linear elevation. So it's a linear elevation that goes diagonally. So if we look at it here, that's this, by the way, oblique ridges can only be found on maxillary molars. So this is an oblique ridge right over there. It goes obliquely. It's not even straight. This one kind of is almost straight, union of two triangular ridges. So it goes from a triangular ridge of the distal buccal cusp. This is the distal buccal cusp. Let me just change it in color. Okay, green. This is a distal buccal cusp. You've got this as your mesiolingual cusp. This is your mesiobuccal cusp. And this is your distal lingual cusp. All right. Just put it in circles. So you can look clear, but that's what we'll do what we have. Let me just change the color of that one. Yep, blue seems perfect. All right, so it's a triangle. So it goes from a triangular ridge of the distal buccal cusp. So this is the distal buccal cusp, triangular ridge of it, all the way to the distal ridge. This is the distal ridge of the mesiolingual cusp. So that's the mesiolingual cusp, the distal ridge, all the way to triangular ridge of the distal buccal cusp. So it goes in obliquely like that. Again, this is a transverse ridge. So that's triangular ridge. Oh damn, we've got too much colors. Actually, let me just get rid of that. So it looks more clear. Okay, so this is oblique ridge, goes from the triangular ridge of the distal buccal cusp, and that is this over there is a distal ridge of the mesiolingual cusp. Together, they form an oblique ridge. Accidentally deleted it, but together they form an oblique ridge. This is a triangular ridge. This is a triangular ridge. Both of them together is called a transverse ridge. All right, so I've decided to add a cervical ridge to explain and incisal ridge. Okay, so cervical ridge is like a prominent elevation that can be seen on a cervical third of the facial surfaces of teeth. It's more prominent on deciduous. Okay, so it's like right there, facial surface. It's more prominent on deciduous teeth than permanent teeth. You know, this is a deciduous teeth. This is a permanent teeth right there. So it's more prominent here. Let me just delete some of that so it looks a bit clear. All right. Okay, looks more prominent here than it's here. It looks more prominent here than it's over here. So that's what we call cervical ridge. Over there is a cervical ridge. All right. Second thing is you got an incisal ridge. So it's just a ridge that can be found on the incisal surface of newly erupted incisors. This incisal ridge later turns into something what we call as incisal edge. So you may see in sources or books, you know, what's the difference between incisal ridge and an incisal edge? Incisal ridge is just an elevation that can be found on an incisal surface of incisors, newly erupted incisors. Later on in life, this incisor will, will come in contact with, will come in contact with food, and will later get rubbed out and turn into an edge. This edge right over there is called an incisal edge. All right, we're finished with elevations. Now we'll be talking about depressions. So for the first one, we have is something we call a fossa. A fossa, by definition, is an irregularly shaped depression or a concavity. We're going to be talking about lingual fossa, central fossa, triangular fossa. So for the lingual fossa, it's regularly shaped, so it's just a fossa that can be found on a lingual surface of interior teeth. It's right there. So it seems like a depression or concavity, you know, right over there on the lingual surface of all interior teeth. You know, right over there is the marginal ridge. That's the cingulum. This over there, colored in red, that's what we call a lingual fossa. Now, second thing we've got a central fossa. Central fossa is like a concavity that can be found on a central part of molars and premolars. Oh, sorry, just molars. So it's just a concavity that can be found on a central part of molars. Triangular fossa is a triangle-shaped depression or concavity that can be found just right next to the marginal ridge. So this right over there is a triangular fossa. That's the triangular fossa. That's triangular fossa. That's the triangular fossa. It's called triangular fossa because it represents or looks like a triangle-shaped concavity. And this triangular fossa is named according to its location. So this is called mesotriangular fossa, and this one's called a distal triangular fossa. All right. So we have a sulcus. The second thing we have is sulcus. Sulcus, by definition, is a long depression or a valley on the surface of tooth. Can be found between the ridges and the cusps. Okay, so if we just go back to our imagination again, this mountain is a cusp. Now that's its ridge. That's a ridge. And this little river is something we're going to be calling a groove. We'll be talking about groove later on. Now this, I'm just changing the color for the valley. Look at this valley, this whole valley right over there, that's what we call a sulcus. So obviously right there, you can see on the tooth, there's a sulcus, goes there, goes there, goes there. So it's just a long depression or a valley. It can be found between the ridges and the cusps. All right. So yeah, that's over there, that's a groove. A groove can be a developmental groove and it can be a supplemental groove. Developmental groove is a groove that marks the main parts of a tooth. So that's a main groove, that's a developmental groove, that's a developmental groove. A supplemental groove is a secondary groove. It doesn't really mark main parts of the tooth. You know, this right over there, that's a secondary, that's a secondary. It's just there to give a little definition on the tooth. That's secondary, that's a secondary, that's a secondary, that's a secondary. So it's not really a groove that makes or marks the main parts of the tooth. So if we just go back to the sulcus part, so you can get a deep understand what a sulcus is if you hadn't. So, you know, that's a mountain, that's its ridge, that's a cusp, sorry, that's its ridges. And the river right over there, think of that as the groove. And the yellow thing is, which is the valley, think of that as the sulcus. All right. So the next thing is we have is a pit. A pit is a small pinpoint depression located at a junction of developmental grooves or terminals of these grooves. So we've got a central pit, and over there, okay, so we've got a central pit, mesial pit, distal pit, you know, you've got a buccal pit over there, it just depends. So this blue thing right there, that's mesial pit. This triangle thing, that's a mesotriangular fossa. This triangle there, that's the distal triangular fossa. Inside of it is distal pit. And this is this diamond shaped thing is central fossa. This green thing is what we call a central pit. That's a distal pit, central pit, mesial pit. That's a buccal pit. So it's just a pinpoint depression. Now think of pits as a pothole that you can that you see on the roads. Okay, so think of this. This is the road. This road right over there is your groove. And in this groove, it has some sort of in this road, could have a pothole. This pothole is what we can call a pit. It's just a pinpoint depression. All right, lobes. Lobes are by definition just one of the primary sections of formation of developmental of the crown. So lobes are what really makes up a tooth. Teeth develop in parts, and these parts are called lobes. So teeth develop in parts. These parts are called lobes. Usually cusps represent a lobe. So I'll be talking about each type of teeth and the amount of lobes it has. So for the anterior teeth, this is inside the canine, I believe, but that's the anterior teeth right there. Anterior teeth have 3 lobes, facially, labially, and the single lobe lingually. Okay, the single lobe, it's cingulum right over there. So a cingulum is just a whole lobe. So we got 3 facially, and the 4th one is a cingulum. You can see it right over there. 3 facially, and the 4th one can be found as a cingulum, represents a cingulum. Or the cingulum represents a lobe, sorry. Alright. So, anterior teeth have 4. I'm just marking a different color. Where's the eraser? There it is. Pen. Okay. So, anterior teeth have 4 lobes. For the molars, it depends on the amount of cusps it has. So, for this one, it has 5 cusps. For this tooth right there, it has 5 cusps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each cusp represents a lobe. So this one has 5 lobes, and this right over there, this one has 4 cusps. This one has 4 lobes. This one has 4 cusps, so it has 4 lobes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Has 4 lobes. Let me just change color as well. So this one has 5. This one has 4. And wisdom teeth, sometimes they come in lots of variations. Sometimes they would have 3 cusps. So that means they have 3 lobes. So all depends on amount of cusps a molar has. That's in terms of the amount of lobes. For the premolars, it's somewhat similar to the incisors and anterior teeth. So it has 3 facially. Let me just change back to the red. So it's 3 facially. 1, 2, 3. That's the buccal cusp. That's the lingual cusp. So as 3 facially. 1, 2, 3, and its lingual cusp represents its 4th lobe. So this one has 4 lobes. This one as well has 4 lobes. It's the same one, but it's an approximate view. So yeah, you can see it's like 3 facially. 3. So you can see, one you can't really see is on the side. So 1, 2, 3. On the back has like a 4th one. Lingual cusp represents as a whole lobe. The buccal cusps is shaped into 3 lobes. Now, in a case where the mandibular second premolars, they have 5 cusps. They have 2 lingual cusps. They have a cusp here and a cusp here. Let me just delete it so it'll be more clear. In a case where premolar has 3 cusps, okay, this one has 2 cusps, a buccal cusp and a lingual cusp. But in a case where it has 3 cusps, like in the mandibular second premolars, would have a cusp here and a cusp here. In that case, it would have 5 lobes, 3 facially, and each lingual cusp which represents a whole lobe. So that would be 4, that would be 5. That's in the case it has 3 cusps. But in this case, it has just 2 cusps, so it's just 4. Yeah, so it's just 4. Now for mamelons. Mamelons are just 3 shaped or 3 rounded protuberances right over there. So that's a mamelon. So it's just 3 shaped protuberance. Okay, it's more clear here. It can be found on newly erupted incisors. That's why, you know, when a child bites you, it always hurts. If you had like a little brother, they would just go ahead and bite you. That would be, it's really painful. It's because of them mamelons right there. So by definition, it's just 3 rounded protuberances right up there. They look like a shark teeth, but they're not. So yeah, that's what they are. It's called a mamelon. Now for the root. Okay, so we've done everything with the crown. Now we'll be trying to find. Okay, now we have some basic terminology for the root. So for the root, let me just change it to blue. So root. For the first one is we have a something called cervix. Cervix is the neck of your tooth. This right over there. That's a cervix. So it's just the neck of your tooth. Now in the cervix has something called the cement enamel junction. The CEG for short. CEG for short. It's just a line that divides the root from the crown. So the cervix is the neck of the tooth. Second thing is we've got is a root trunk. Root trunk is the portion of the root before before furication, before division. So you know that's a root trunk right there. That's a root trunk. So after that it just divides. But yeah, so before it divides, it's called a root trunk. Right over there. Let me just delete so it's even more clear after for the rest. So that's the root trunk for you. For the furication is the point of division. After the root trunk, it's gonna have to divide. After it divides, that is called the furication. So point of division. Sorry. Here it's called a bifurcation. Bi as in 2, tri as in 3. Now it's called a bifurcation in this case, not a trifurcation, because it divides into 2 roots. In a case it divides into 3 roots, such as the maxillary molars, it's called a trifurcation. But here it's called a root bifurcation, bi as in 2. So it's just a point of division, sorry. Now the space between these roots is called a focal region. It's as well called the interradicular region as well, but a focal region is for even more simplified version. Okay, so it's called the focal region. The space between it, just marked it over there. It's called the focal region. Apex is the root tip right over there. That's an apex. That's an apex. That's apex of the lingual root. That's the apex of a buccal root. Now in this apex, let me just go back to the eraser. We have something we call an apical foramen. It's not really clear. This right over there, this hole right over there. Now this is where blood vessels and nerves come and innervate the tooth and supply the tooth with blood vessels. So it's just an opening at the root. So if we go back to the definition, it's an opening at the root tip where blood vessels and nerves pass through. So yeah, that should be it. So you've got a cervix. Let me just delete everything. So you got cervix, neck of the tooth, you got a root trunk, portion of the root before it divides. The portion divides is called the bifurcation. In this case, it's called a bifurcation. Tri for 3 roots, bifurcation for 2 roots. The space between them is called the focal region. The tip of the root is called an apex. At the tip of the apex, there's an opening. This opening is called the apical foramen. Okay, foramina because it's just one. It talks about, I mean, sorry, it marks 2. Apical foramen. That's what it's called. Alright, so that's it for the end of the video. Hopefully you've understood what I just explained to you. This is a very important topic for you to know before you go ahead and read, study the morphology of each tooth surface. And the like is much appreciated, and thank you for watching.